Hello and welcome to our first ASHRAE podcast slash video series. Today we have Peter Adams with us on the call from Morrison Hirschfield. And this series and program is all about bringing to you valuable information from longtime ASHRAE members, and so you can make the most of it. So today, as I said, we have Peter with us. Hi, Peter. How are you doing?
Good morning. Very good. Thank you.
So Peter, why don't we get started here? Why don't you tell us about yourself a bit?
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Peter Adams. I graduated from mechanical engineering from Memorial University of Newfoundland in 1995. So it's quite a while ago now. I quickly went into the field of building science. I didn't follow the traditional path of a mechanical engineer in terms of consulting. I'm now a building scientist, and I have been ever since graduation, spending some of my work terms at the National Research Council in Ottawa. So that's what I've been doing since then. As a building scientist, I spent a lot of time diagnosing buildings, why they're not working properly from a building envelope perspective. Because of my mechanical engineering background, I feel like I have a little bit of an advantage over some because I can understand heat transfer, moisture transfer, air transfer better than maybe a lot in terms of how it affects building performance. So I've been able to leverage, I think, that experience as well. So I spent a lot of time, as I said, diagnosing buildings, designing repairs, and I really enjoy working with mechanical engineers on these problems because the building envelope and mechanical engineering are very closely tied together. That's basically it. In a nutshell, I get involved with all kinds of different projects, which is kind of fun. It keeps it very interesting. Nothing is the same typically. Of course, every day is. Most times it's exciting, sometimes not, but for the most part, just like anything, it's been exciting. It's got me interested all these years. So.
That's awesome. That's some great experience, Peter. How about your involvement with ASHRAE?
So I've been involved actually since 2006, and I kind of got involved when a close colleague of mine was retiring, and he had been involved with ASHRAE for many years prior to that, and so we thought it was a good idea for our company to continue the relationship with ASHRAE, and so I shadowed him for a couple of meetings back in 2006, and then started attending on my own shortly thereafter after he retired. So I started, most of my time has been spent at the technical committee level, so technical committee 4.4, which is building envelopes and building materials. So I also joined the SSPC, or the Standing Committee for Standard 160, which is moisture in buildings. So in TC 4.4, I became secretary and vice chair and chair at one point in time, a number of years ago. So I went through that whole learning curve of how ASHRAE works and how all the politics involved and keeping everything running. So that was good experience. I've given multiple presentations over the years through ASHRAE, which has been fun and enjoyable and engaging. And I'm currently actively involved on TC 4.4 still and SSPC 160. And hopefully I'll be able to attend some meetings in person again soon. The next one's in Las Vegas. I don't think I'll be attending in person, but hopefully thereafter. The one in the spring is in Toronto. So, or the summer will be Toronto. So hoping to be able to participate in that in person.
Yeah, for sure. We're already planning that meeting, so we hope to see you there.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So why should people get involved in technical committees, Peter?
Well, for me, I didn't really know a whole lot going in when I joined in 2006. My experience at the time was related to the handbooks, the guidelines and standards. And so when I went in, I realized just how much you can learn. For sure, that you can the relationships that you develop with the people that you meet, being involved with the technical committees. I think it's a really good way to kind of up your personal game in terms of your experience and your knowledge about building science or mechanical engineering or whatever committee you decide to join. I've fostered some amazing relationships, some long-term, lifelong friendships through my committee work, and they've become really good resources as well in my work. If I come across certain things in a day-to-day operation, I was like, oh, I know someone from the UK who's a specialist in that, and so I can reach out to them and say, hey, what do you think? And so that's been a real nice bonus and addition to my personal career. You're contributing to something important. Back in school, I was using the ASHRAE handbook very regularly. I was using the guidelines regularly, and to all of a sudden be on a committee and writing text for these documents is it's pretty cool thing to be doing all of a sudden. So there's lots of good reasons to get involved.
That's great. Any any advice for people coming into the HVAC industry?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what I learned, as a building science person, I kind of come at it from a different perspective. So what I learned is that I used to get frustrated. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I used to get frustrated with mechanical engineers because I would find they'd be doing a lot of the same things over and over again. What I quickly realized, it's not necessarily their fault. I think what's happened to our industry is there's a lot of pressure on fees and time. And so the biggest advice I have for someone entering the HVAC industry is don't be shy. Make sure you market yourself appropriately, you demand the right fee and the right amount of time to actually do what you need to do. Our biggest asset as engineers is our ability to think and process information and not just draw lines. So make sure you demand the time and the fee that's necessary to do the job. And also, I found that mechanical engineers were often treated as an afterthought. It's getting better with an integrated design process, I think, but make sure your mechanical team is engaged early on in the process, not just later in the project, so that you can contribute necessarily to the success of the project. So those two things: make sure you have enough time and fee to do the job properly, and try to get it engaged as early as possible in your project so that you can make the biggest difference.
Thank you, Peter. That's great advice. Any any memorable moments in the industry or throughout your career you want to share?
Yeah, there's been a couple of times where I've really felt we work together with mechanical engineers. So like I said, mechanical engineer, yes, by training, but building science by practice. And so, building envelope and mechanical engineering are completely intertwined. So my favorite times are when I worked with mechanical engineers to come up with a really neat solution that otherwise may not have been possible. So one example was an old government building here in Ontario where they had really old windows from the 1970s that were very inefficient. And they all of a sudden did an HVAC upgrade that allowed them to humidify space. And so the problem was that with the humidified space, there was a lot of condensation predicted in the wintertime. And so I worked with our mechanical engineers to program the building automation system to step down the interior humidity as the outside temperature dropped to avoid condensation. So the humidity would step down as the outside temperature dropped, and then step back up again as the outside temperature warmed up again. And we were able to avoid condensation on the windows that way until the owners of the building, or in this case, the government, was able to replace the windows a few years later. So that was a really good way to work together and figure out a solution to a problem that was somewhat complicated and could have ended up being a real problem with lots of water on the windows and people worried about mold growth and things like that. And there's another time where I worked at the Justice Building in Ottawa where they wanted to insulate the walls and they wanted to do all these fancy things with HVAC, and myself and my colleagues, we investigated and figured out that they really couldn't insulate the walls, or they would have damaged the stonework if they insulated the walls, because the walls were quite happy with all the heat flow that was going through them because it was built a long time ago, and the walls really needed to stay that way in order to minimize or to prevent damage of the historic stone. So those kinds of projects I find are very exciting. We get to collaborate together with mechanical engineers and building scientists.
That's true. Collaborative environments are the best.
For sure.
Any I think we're done with our questions for today, Peter. Any closing remarks for the audience?
Yeah, I certainly encourage you to get involved with ASHRAE. If you're going to be part of ASHRAE, join technical committees, participate in the local chapter. That's where the value comes from. I mean, there's a lot of information. You can sit back and learn a lot of things, but from my experience, really getting involved with whatever committee is interest to you, get involved, meet people, form those relationships, and I think you'll find that it'll become very rewarding for you personally and for your career. Like I said, I've met some amazing friends that I'll be friends with for my lifetime through ASHRAE, and I'm sure you all could do the same. So.
That's for sure. Well, thank you, Peter, for being here, and thank you for the great advice.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.